Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, this is Renegade Operative here, and I'd like to welcome you to my discussion video about The Last of Us Part 2 Factions, the multiplayer variant of The Last of Us. The Last of Us Part 2 was just announced, but I'm going to switch gears from the story to the multiplayer. I'm going to be talking to you about multiplayer predictions. If you still want to see my story analysis of the things that I saw in the initial trailer, then check out the description below and it should have the link to that video in question. I'm going to be talking to you about what is Factions multiplayer, what could necessarily be improved, and the gameplay decisions that I feel should or shouldn't be part of the equation, should or shouldn't be a staple of Factions anymore from its original counterpart in the first game. To make these sections easier to break down, we'll introduce title cards from subject to subject. That way, you will precisely know what each and every key point entails. What is The Last of Us Factions? The Last of Us Factions is the multiplayer component of the original entry. The goals of Factions are stressed across 3 game modes: Supply Raid, Interrogation, and Survivors. Supply Raid is what is considered to be the team deathmatch aspect, where you get a limited amount of team respawns while you have to thin out the herd. Once the respawns reach 0, there will be a last man standing notification which pops up on screen, meaning that all the lives have basically ran out and you're on your last leg, and you have to fully eliminate the last team members to get the victory. Survivors is pretty much self-explanatory. You have 1 life each round, and the team who eliminates the most opponents each round gets the round point. Interrogation is objective based, so you have to actually manage to interrogate your foes without outright killing them. Once the interrogation meter on your team is filled up, you will be able to discover the enemy lockbox. If the enemy lockbox is fully opened by a player, then the round ends and you automatically get the victory. The Last of Us multiplayer was unique in the sense that the game actually did incorporate stealth, crafting, and the brutal amounts of inhuman violence from the original game into the multiplayer component. When it's carried over, it mostly remained intact in this iteration of Factions. It is in no way comparable to the Uncharted series, where the rope mechanics, the Fast and Furious gameplay, and the mysticals are thrown all over the place. It's a very methodical multiplayer experience when it comes to The Last of Us. It is all about teamwork at its core. Any sort of skirmish runs the risk of exposing your whole team by making noise on the radar, and it could create a choke point where you can be easily surrounded. Factions makes it known that every time someone dies, especially in Survivors, it really counts against your team since it's mostly based around lives. Thus, teamwork is very important. It's more tighter in The Last of Us than you would believe compared to Uncharted. What could be improved in Factions 2.0? Considering we're starting fresh off the heels of The Last of Us Part 2, having an announcement trailer, obviously Factions is going to probably be bound to make some sort of comeback. This is pretty much obvious. This is pretty much written in stone unless Naughty Dog says otherwise, and I don't see them dropping this multiplayer component anytime soon, especially since the first one did add some sort of replay value, even though people probably thought it was a tacked on online experience. I'm going to specifically talk about some of the do's and don'ts, the stuff they should keep for The Last of Us Factions, and the stuff they should remove if they were to expand on this multiplayer experience. I'm going to talk about additions a little bit later, so stay tuned for that. They should remove Listen Mode. Listen Mode enables players to spot people through any sort of geometry about a few feet away. If you're hiding behind a car, a tree, or a wall as an example, then you can see anyone there in front of you. The radar is enough, especially if a loud noise tracks a location, so I think they should remove Listen Mode entirely. You can see frigging people through walls. Tell me that's not a cheap mechanic, or does it sound like one? I think that especially with the multiplayer, how if you want it to be more competitive, if you want it to be taken more serious, you should remove this mechanic entirely. I think that if they were to keep listen mode by any stretch of the imagination, then it should be limited to footsteps, maybe spotting enemy blood detection on the floors or the walls or whatever, to give you a good glimpse of where someone is without fully knowing where they are, unless you go and find them or go find those footprints, etc. I feel DLC weapons should also be removed too, because let's face facts, people, having a gun with a different attribute that's actually better compared to the default weapons in the game creates an uneven playing field. You'll have users who don't care about weapon packs possibly being disadvantaged because some lucky guy stocked up on an arsenal all because he paid for it. It's a paying to win mechanic, it's paying to win gameplay. It's never a good sign. There's a part of me that wants those one-hit kill melee weapons also removed, but I think the limited crafting that they implemented in patch 109 in the previous Last of Us factions did limit your crafting ability, so you didn't get that many weapons if you went to an ammo drop box. And I think reduced range for the melee weapons in this new game might be a good way to nerf the one-hit kill melee weapons. No one should be able to swing a modified 2x4 through a hail of bullet fire. That's just a personal gripe that I had with the old multiplayer out of all the matches that I played. Last but not least, please fix the Firefly and Hunter micromanagement survivor journeys. Despite this being a part of the game where you have a 12-week calendar where you manage food, supplies, and equipment for your own encampments online, this was just boring in theory. It's a good idea on paper, but in execution it only served as an annoyance when your population could be randomly wiped off the face of the earth as you approach week 12, when it happened back to back to back. I think it needs to be a lot more fun. It needs to be more of a fair challenge. It needs to be more rewarding if you maintain a population to be healthy. Maybe they can give you taunts, clothes, and weapon unlocks as you progress in the game. That will be an incentive to keep them all alive, as opposed to just getting gold trophies just to supplement the fact that you really did this arduous task. It should be a lot more fun and engaging to do this feature if you're going to include it in The Last of Us Factions 2.0. What additions could be added to The Last of Us Part 2 factions? In no way was the original multiplayer perfect, but it did start to give a competitive edge to the survival aspects, and most of them were done well, especially the violence and the crafting system, things that should be kept for the sequel. However, it needs more. If you're talking about upping the ante, then you need more room for improvement. Sure, putting bullets in the faces of human opponents is nice and all, but the various coders and directors at Naughty Dog jump for joy when mentioning a three-way faction and dynamic gameplay. The three-way factions involve you, the player, the Hunter AI, and the Infected AI fighting. Perhaps they can take this a step further and take a page out of Resident Evil 5's book with Team Slayers, but with a bit of a twist. Instead of it being the Infected, maybe it could be also Hunter AI in a match, or maybe other online players trying to stop your progress from getting to the objective of killing the Infected and getting a huge point spread. The team with the most point spread when it comes to Infected wins the round, and killing human opponents will get you a lower point spread, just like Team Slayers in Resident Evil 5. And I think the twist should be you could either play this co-op or competitive, which will give you various options if you want to tackle it with a partner or if you want to go against the world. Then honestly, I think that co-op should be added into the mix with The Last of Us Part 2 factions. I think that there should be a horde mode based around co-op where you and your team fight against Infected wave by wave. This could be the perfect opportunity to add more replay value to the mix. I also think that 3-team deathmatch would also work well in The Last of Us Part 2 factions, considering how it's essentially a team-based shooter. They should have no gripes with pulling this from Uncharted 3 because it's essentially you and your partner fighting against two other teams with them and their partners. So how it works is it's a team of 3 with 2 people fighting against each other in a deathmatch environment. and I think that will essentially bring you closer to teamwork, because you're just fighting with one partner alone against these other two teams. And it's pretty interesting how three-team deathmatch really worked in Uncharted 3's favor. Uncharted 3 in general just had a lot of modes, and I'm surprised that Naughty Dog did not incorporate them in Uncharted 4, like all of them, because they were really good, really varied, really diverse. Free for all too, where you could fight against the world. It was just fun. But I'm just talking about stuff for The Last of Us, and I think that three-team deathmatch will work because teamwork is a necessity in three-team deathmatch. So this will work out perfectly for The Last of Us factions. So it looks like it's time to sign off. This is Renegade Operative here. Remember to rate, comment, and subscribe, and support the channel. I will see you guys next time. Renegade out. Hopefully you enjoyed this video.